Hey guys, welcome back to Eric Reacts with more Game of Thrones History and Lore Season 6 this time. And I need a haircut desperately, but I'm going to finish watching a section of this. Probably going to be 4 sections again because it's an hour and 22 minutes long. And yeah, let's get into it. I want to see what we learned this time. Knights of the Vale. Peter Baelish relates the story of how the Knights of the Vale won their home and kept it through the ages. Cool.
No army in the Seven Kingdoms can match the pride and chivalry of the Knights of the Vale. After all, they were the first true knights in Westeros.
What?
The Knights of the Vale were originally the Knights of Andalos, an eastern nation whose people invaded Westeros thousands of years ago. From the sea, the Vale seemed to the Andals an ideal new home. A wide, fertile valley isolated from the rest of Westeros and its kingdoms by a great mountain range. The first men who held it, moreover, were sparse and divided, and waded into battle with bronze axes and armor that couldn't match Andal horses and steel. But what the first men lacked in weaponry, they made up for in ferocity. Finally uniting behind King Robar Royce, the first men smashed the Andals in battle after battle, reclaiming the Vale and pushing the invaders back to the sea from whence they'd come.
Wow.
Learning from the first men, the remaining Andals united behind a leader of their own. Not a king or a lord, but a knight who'd been born in the Vale and knew it as well as the first men. Sir Artus Arryn, known as the Falcon Knight. The armies of the first men and the Andals met beneath the Giant's Lance to decide the fate of the Vale. Sir Artus had many more mounted knights than the first men, who preferred to fight on foot. But the first men had seized the high ground, digging trenches in front of their ranks and lining them with sharpened stakes smeared with offal and excrement. 6 times the Andal knights charged, and 6 times the first men threw them back. But on the 7th, a fearsome Andal warrior broke through the ranks of the first men, and the Andals rushed through the gap. If King Robar had been wiser, he would have retreated and saved his army for another day. Then again, if he'd been wise at all, he'd never have risked his army of foot soldiers against mounted knights in the first place. When King Robar saw the falcon helm of Sir Artus across the field, he wagered that the Andals would break if they lost their leader, and rode hard for the Falcon Knight. The singers paint a pretty picture of the battle. The king in flashing bronze armor, the knight in silvered steel. But the duel lasted no longer than a verse of the songs. For King Robar had taken a Valyrian sword off a dead Andal lord, and it sheared through Sir Artus' helm much like a bird's wing through the air. As the Falcon Knight tumbled to earth, King Robar thought he'd won his desperate gamble. Then he heard the trumpets behind him. When he turned, he saw 500 fresh Andal knights pouring down the Giant's Lance. And the man at its head was also the man at Robar's feet. For Sir Artus, unique in that age, or indeed any age, esteemed cunning even more than martial strength, and had clad one of his knights in his spare suit of armor, leaving him to die at Robar's hand, while Sir Artus took his best horsemen up a goat track he knew from childhood. The charge of the Andal Knights broke the last great army of the first men, who would never again threaten the new Knights of the Vale. Some of the defeated would even join their ranks in the years to come, but many more fled to the mountains, choosing savagery over submission.
That makes so much sense.
Ever since, the Knights of the Vale enjoyed an
Lord Royce
position in Westeros.
Yeah.
They could sally forth from the Vale at will, knowing that if battle went against them, they could retreat through the Bloody Gate, where no army could follow. Until the dragons changed the game.
Until the dragons.
When Aegon the Conqueror landed in Westeros, the Queen Regent of the Vale shut the Bloody Gate against the Targaryens and massed the Knights of the Vale behind it to lock it. But Visenya simply flew her dragon to a balcony of the Eyrie where the boy king was playing, and gave the boy a ride round the castle in return for his mother's submission.
Wow.
With the conquest, no more could the Knights of the Vale hide behind their mountains, Nor, they soon discovered, did they need to. For thousands of years, the other kingdoms had warred and treated to balance each other's might, whilst the Vale kept to itself. None realized what power the Vale could have until Jon Arryn defied the Iron Throne, refusing to surrender Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon to the Mad King. The North, the Riverlands, and the Stormlands couldn't have beaten the other three kingdoms by themselves, but the Knights of the Vale rode with them. Now, the North is freezing, the Riverlands are burnt, the Stormlands are spent, Dorne is distant, the Westerlands are weakened, and the Reach is paralyzed. Of all the great armies in Westeros, only the Knights of the Vale have yet to suffer exhaustion or defeat. The Bloody Gate is opening again onto Westeros, and through it passes opportunity.
That's intense. So this just solidifies my theory for me that Littlefinger didn't enter the fray at Battle of the Bastards until the last moment, so he could preserve his victory, so he could preserve his men. He preserved his own men so that, he needs to guarantee that the Vale is continuously strong. Makes a lot of sense. The old way, Euron Greyjoy reminisces about the glorious reaving history of the Ironborn, when their people were feared wherever the salt of the sea could be smelled. Yeah, I wonder why that ended. Targaryens? I'm eating blueberries.
All across the Iron Islands, men sit around driftwood fires and drink to the old way. When the Ironborn were feared, wherever the waves were heard. When our strength was in our ships, not our stories. I don't blame them. Drinking to the old way is easier than living it. Our ancestors took to the sea because the Iron Islands are shit without the crops that grow from it. 30 cold, wet rocks off the coast of Westeros, and a dozen more clustered around the lonely light deep in the Sunset Sea.
What can they do then, instead of
But hard
breathing and
places
reaping?
breed hard men.
Trade? What can they trade? Ships?
The sea. They had walked to Westeros, and even their fishermen never left sight of shore. I wish I could have seen the face of the first watchman to see our ships climb over the horizon. He was not the last. No matter how dark the night, or how high the waves, come dawn our prows cut through the morning mist and struck the beaches and riverbanks. Before the sun reached its height, we vanished again into the sea. Our longships filled with gold, food, scared children, and sobbing women.
What the hell?
For thousands of years, the Ironborn reaved up and down the Sunset Sea, driving the men of the Greenlands far inland, or into walled castles where they paid us tribute. In the depth of winter we feasted, while the men who had planted and harvested crops starved. Their sons worked our mines, and their daughters warmed our beds.
Mines.
The stories claim that the old way died with Huron the Black and his sons at Harrenhal. Our ships and axes were no match for Aegon's dragons, so our ancestors bent their steel into fishhooks and our kingdom into villages, and started telling the red tales around the fire of how we used to be strong, and how one day we would be so again. Generations later, a young boy listened to them. Dalton Greyjoy, the wild young heir to Pike, was rowing at 5 and reeving at 10 in the Basilisk Isles with his uncle. By 14, Dalton had sailed as far as Old Geese, fought in a dozen battles, and claimed 4 soft wives. In his 15th year, he avenged his uncle's death in battle, but he took a dozen wounds and emerged from the fight, drenched head to heel in blood. From
15.
that day forth, men called him the Red Kraken. During the
Red
Dance of
Kraken?
Dragons, the Red Kraken picked the side that was fighting the Lannisters, and fell upon the Westerlands while the Lannisters were up at war. Casterly Rock itself proved too strong, once the lady of the castle barred its gates. But the Ironborn burned the Lannister fleet, and sacked Lannisport, carrying off gold, grain, and hundreds of women and girls, including Lord Lannister's favorite mistress, and all his bastards. The Red Kraken now ruled the Sunset Sea as his forebears had, and his longships again brought the old way to the coast of Westeros. But then the war ended, and the mainland armies came home. The Iron Throne commanded the Red Kraken to stop reaving, and when he didn't, a mistress opened his throat as he slept. While his son squabbled, the Lannisters sent their soldiers to the Iron Islands.
Ooh.
Thousands of men, women, and children were put to the sword, and scores of villages and hundreds of longships were put to the torch. The glorious return to the old way had lasted almost 2 years. My brother vowed to return us to the old way as well. He sat on the salt throne and sent our reavers to the shores of Westeros, just as he remembered from the stories he heard as a child. An old way for an old man. But while he listened to the stories, I
wrote a new one. Oh, okay.
It was never the old way to me. It was the only way.
Interesting. So he wants to continue reaving and raping. So that's definitely going to be a no-no from Daenerys. Cersei, if he sides with Cersei, would she let him continue doing that? But yeah, Yara and Theon, should they win? Should they take back Pike? What is their path forward? Obviously, reaving and raping is not the way to go, and Daenerys sees that. But do they have enough to trade with the Reach, with Highgarden, for supplies? Do they? How do they thrive? And I think Yara said she would give them their. I think she said they were asking for their independence. I don't know if she actually gave it to them. I'm actually a little unclear on that, but yeah, I don't know what their path forward will be. What their economic. They could provide ships to every other place since they're so good at building them. So I'm guessing they have very high quality wood. I don't know. All right. Anyways, the Summer Sea. Euron Greyjoy describes what lies beyond the Summer Sea, a journey many attempt, fewer survive. Histories and lore. Oh, it's not history and lore. It's histories and lore.
Circling the Jade Sea is the dream of every merchant, and the other side is the golden empire of Yeti, which was ancient when the Valyrians were still fucking goats. Even its ruins dwarf every city in Westeros, and its princes are said to live in houses of solid gold and feast on meat powdered with pearls and jade. Foolish talk. If it were true, I would have visited them long ago. But a bold merchant will risk 2 years for one voyage, to fatten his holds with spices, gems, and silks, so that he never wants for anything again. To be fair, many never do, because my ship, Silence, finds them on their return.
Silence?
Their merchant dreams look so pitiful poured out on my decks. Not enough for any lifetime but their own. Traders from the Summer Islands make tougher prey. Not even the Silence can run down their sworn ships on the open sea. When we take them by surprise, our rams splinter and crack against their hulls, carved from rare hardwoods of the Summer Islands, fitted together without a single nail. Worse, every sworn ship carries a company of archers armed with golden hard bows, which can hurl the shaft hard enough to pierce steel plate. After all that trouble, we often find their holds filled only with maps, fruit, and wooden trinkets. Hardly worth our time and blood, except for their women. To worship their god, all women of the Summer Islands learn to fuck. It's enough to make a man devout. Ebony's whalers are the most worthless of prices. The men of Ib are short, thick, and hairy. So are their women. Not even tales of their six-breasted contempt men to take.
They're 6?
But the Ebonese know how to build ships. Their great-bellied whalers can weather any storm and withstand the assaults of the largest beasts. In battle, the Ebonese are incredibly strong, and even their blood reeks of blubber and oil, and their holds are rarely worth scrubbing our decks free of the stench. When our holds were full or needed repair, we set a course for the greatest safe harbor of the Summer Sea, the Basilisk Isles, Port Plunder, Stye, or Skash. No map can find these towns, nor can the laws of men. The slavers keep their captives in caves in the Isle of Tears. Pirates trade their goods on Barter Beach, and hire fresh crews from the murderers filling every inn. Great piles of old yellow skulls line the shores of one deserted island. Offerings from captains who have fresh heads pinned to their masts. Once every generation, the free cities send fleets to destroy the towns and hang every man they find. They do, and the towns are abandoned to rot and sink back into the slime. But come the next year, another Port Plunder sprouts up somewhere else in the isle, like a toadstool from a new pile of shit. For many years, I brought silence to the summer sea. But when I close my eyes, I hear the waves breaking below the bridges of Pike. I hear the Kingsmoot chanting my brother's name.
Kingsmoot?
Merchants paid the gold price, buying their desires with coin. Reavers paid the iron price, taking what we want from the corpses of the men who had it. But for what I dream, no gold can buy, and no iron can take. I must pay with fire and blood.
Interesting. He wants to take with fire and blood? Isn't that doesn't sound too different from paying the iron price, just killing people? Fire and blood. That sounds like maybe allying with Daenerys is what he was planning to do. Fire. I don't know. I guess it could also be Cersei. Fire and blood. The wildfire. I don't know. Children of the Forest versus the First Men. This is what led to the White Walkers, right? The Three-Eyed Raven recounts the ancient rivalry between the First Men and the legendary Children of the Forests, who I don't know if they're extinct or not. Oh man.
War
Sorry, guys.
did not come to Westeros with men. In the dawn of days, the Children of the Forest fought the giants. But
Whoa.
neither race sought to destroy the other, or lay claim to the continent. They couldn't. The children hunted and fought with dragon-glass arrows and spears, and the giants had only the branches they pulled from trees. Nor could both races fill more than one of the 7 kingdoms of today. Then the southern deserts coughed up a new race, the First Men, who had crossed the narrow sea over the Armored Dorn. Unlike the children and giants, the First Men lived in huts and villages, and farmed the land to eat. And there were so many. As the numbers swelled, men needed ever more fields and timber. Of course, they saw that the great forests could provide both. When they cut into the deep woods, however, they stumbled on a strange sight. A white tree with red leaves, and a face staring back at them. At first, they were afraid, but the face never spoke, even when the axe bit into it. The First Men didn't know what a werewood was. They didn't know that a werewood grows forever if left in peace.
No, man.
Or that the native children believed their spirits went into it after death. The children had no letters or runes, all of the history, songs and prayers, only the trees remembered. When the
Damn.
children looked at the cleared fields, they saw not white stumps, but their ancestors now lost forever, with their bones stolen to line the invaders' walls. Driven mad by grief, the children attacked. The First Men had never seen a werewood, but the children had never seen bronze. The dragon-glass arrows glanced off the First Men's shields, and their armor of woven bark split beneath the First Men's swords. As the war raged, the children resorted to the one advantage they had, the magic of their old gods. Their green seers enlisted dire wolves and snow bears, cave lions and eagles, mammoths and serpents. In return, the First Men cut down and burned every werewood they could find,
Damn.
fearing that the children would spy on them through the faces in the trees. The children became desperate. Their green seers called down the Hammer of Waters to break the Arm of Dawn, destroying the bridge that men crossed into Westeros, and to flood the Neck to contain men to the south.
Ooh.
But the first men would not be stopped. Fearing extinction, the children combined their powers for one last spell that would save their people and their land from the invaders. By themselves, the children were too few to resist the onslaught. But if they could turn men's numbers against them. After hundreds of years and untold death and destruction, the wisest heads of the children and the first men finally prevailed. The children couldn't win this war, and the first men didn't want to win, fearing the cost of victory. Heroes and rulers on both sides met upon an isle in the god's eye to form the pact. The children gave up all the lands of Westeros, save for the deep forests, and the first men swore that they would no longer cut down the weirwoods. Thus ended the Dawn Age and began the Age of Heroes.
The Dawn Age.
Yet after the dawn must come the night. The great evil that the children unleashed in the war returned centuries later, and only an alliance between the children and men defeated it. Now it comes again, when the children are a shadow of what they were, and men have long forgotten. But the trees remember, and Brandon Stark must learn.
Everything.
For as we watched the first men, so we will watch the last.
Wow. That's incredible. That is incredible, guys. I love that. All right. That was really, really cool. So these were... Okay, I didn't know that the children... I don't know if we learned... Whenever I watched history and lore, I'm just like, did we learn this already? I'm like shocked by some things. And I'm not shocked, I'm surprised. I didn't know the weirwood trees were the ancestors of the children. And it's nice to find out how they reached an agreement to stop reaving, not reaving, stop the war and stop destroying the trees, the weirwood trees. That's all really interesting. Yeah, wow. It's cool. All right, histories and lore. The Little Birds. Varys the Spider recalls his own history as a boy in Pentos, as well as the creation of his army of little birds. All right, this should be the last one, because we're going over 20 minutes here. Going over a quarter of the way, I assume.
Men called me the Spider long before I came to Westeros. As a young thief in Pentos, I seemed to have 8 hands, each dipped into a stranger's pocket.
Wow.
But the other thieves didn't appreciate my skill, and they had size and strength that I couldn't match. When they discovered why, I was beaten and told that a eunuch boy doesn't belong in the streets, but in the brothels, as any slaver would know. I managed to escape them, and took to sleeping in the sewers by day and prowling the rooftops by night. Barely one step ahead of starvation, much less slavery. Then I met Illyrio Mopatis. He was a bravo who lived by his sword, but his mind was sharper than his blade. I proposed an arrangement. I would spy on lesser thieves and steal their takings. Illyrio would offer help to the thieves' victims, promising to recover their valuables for a fee.
Wow.
Soon every honest man knew to come to Illyrio.
Oh,
whilst
man.
the city's cut purses sought me, half to sell me what they had stolen, and the other half to slit my throat. Sadly for them, Illyrio needed my throat more than he needed theirs. Most thieves, like most men, are fools who think no further than turning a night's plunder into wine. Luckily, as the other thieves had reminded me, I was not a man. Nor were those I hired with the gold we earned. I chose the smallest orphan boys and girls, the ones who were as quick and quiet as me, and taught them to climb walls and slip down chimneys.
Jeez.
My little birds left the shiny trinkets for common thieves, and instead stole letters, ledgers, and charts. Secrets are worth far more than silver or sapphires. Later, I taught my little birds to read the letters themselves and leave them where they lay. So
Nice.
no one would know of our intrusion.
Nice. Very nice.
Illyrio and I grew so rich that Illyria wed a princess of Pentos, whilst whispers of my talents reached the ears of a very anxious king across the narrow sea, who did not trust his son, nor his wife, nor his hand. Nor should he have, as I told him once I arrived and raised more little birds. They thought it the most amazing game to discover all the secret tunnels through the Red Keep and listen to all the whispered secrets from within the castle walls.
Is that him?
I often wonder what became of my little birds once I left King's Landing. Most likely they returned to Flea Bottom, or worse, grew up. One day I'll hear their song again. Until then, well, the world never lacks for orphans. Little birds sing in the west,
They
and
sing
little
in
birds sing
the
in the
east.
east, and a harpy flies into a spider's web.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's very interesting. So, I thought that they still might have been spying on Varys for him. Spying on the kingdom for Varys. Since he did have spies in Essos while he was in Westeros, I assumed the children might have still been spying on Qyburn for Varys, but he says he doesn't know what happened to them. I guess he didn't have time to set up that infrastructure when he left with Tyrion. That's interesting. Yeah. Wow. That's really cool. That one's a short one, but really, really interesting. Really, really fun. Oh, I love history and lore. I can't watch more than like 20 minutes at a time. It's a little rough. But yeah, I found it fascinating. Next time we have House Tarly, I really want to see that. Randall Tarly describes his house's past, yada yada yada. Hopefully he dies soon sometime. Wonder if Sam can take control of House Tarly at some point. He would have to be pardoned from the Night's Watch, but if the White Walkers win, I mean, if they win against the White Walkers, they're not really guarding the North. The Night's Watch isn't really guarding the wall from anybody if they win against the Night's Watch, so they could just disband the Night's Watch, supposedly. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for watching. We'll get back to more history and lore soon. So Season 7 history and lore is going to be really jam-packed together because I finished catching up on episodes of Game of Thrones on April 11th, and the new episode comes out April 14th, Season 8. So I'm going to release one each day, and I'll release part 4. I'm assuming season history and lore season 7 is just as long as this. I'll release part 4 around the morning of the 14th when season 8 is starting, and I don't know how fast I'll be able to edit everything in season 8, the first episode. I forget when. I don't know if I ever looked up when episodes of Game of Thrones actually airs. Is it like at night? I assume it's at night, but I don't know. So maybe my episode will go up on season 8 will go up on Monday. Anyway, I should think to myself and not bore you guys. Anyway, yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys soon for more. Bye, friends.